Hi, my name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney here on Long Island, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program. First, before we get started, as always, if you enjoy these programs, please click the like button on the Google down below. That lets the Google algorithm know that you found this to be a worthwhile video, and it may be of value to somebody else to watch. For our new viewers, let me explain a little bit about what we do. With the help of a guest, I'm going to discuss a topic that's related to real estate on Long Island. The goal is simple: to help you, the Long Island real estate consumer, make a better, more informed decision on your next transaction. Now, today we're going to be talking about something that's not necessarily about a real estate transaction, but absolutely affects everybody, every resident on Long Island. Whether it's commercial or residential, whether you're an owner or a renter or a tenant, anything of that nature, if you live on Long Island, you're affected by development. It's been in the news lately because the governor of New York is proposed having a state oversight committee to increase housing and other development on Long Island. And again, it's a subject that brings out a lot of emotion and is not necessarily very well understood by residents. So today we're going to get into that. Now, with the help, every municipality, every place wherever you live on Long Island, whether we're talking on a county level or whether we're talking about down to the local towns and villages, has a municipality is in charge of zoning. And they help the development, and they give it the thumbs up and the thumbs down with resident input. One such town is the town of Islip, located in Suffolk County. And with the help today of, and I'm honored to have, Miss Angie Carpenter, the Islip Town Supervisor, to join me. And with her help, we're going to discuss how Islip goes about handling development. And from that, we can use that as an example. And wherever you may be on Long Island, you can get a feel for how your municipality may be handling it, how you can interact with that municipality as well to make your concerns known. Supervisor, once again, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Very kind of you.
Now, Supervisor, first off, I want to apologize.
Well, first of all, Angie would be fine.
Okay, Angie.
Okay.
Angie, I feel uncomfortable with it, but I will do my best. Angie, normally at this point, I would ask somebody, a guest, to give their resume. Your resume, we'd be here for the next 20 minutes to an hour. It is really phenomenal. And I wish, and I hope people do look you up to find out what you've accomplished. You're the Islip Town Supervisor. Islip is a fairly large town in Suffolk County. Could you give us a little rundown so we can have a scope of how big it is?
Well, I'd like to say we're real hometown. There's a real sense of hometownness in the town of Islip, but we are the third largest town in the state of New York. We have almost 340,000 residents as of the 21 census count. Very diverse population, the largest Hispanic minority population outside the city of New York is in the town of Islip, in the hamlets mostly of North Bayshore, Central Islip, and Brentwood. And it's a diversity that we embrace in the town. It really makes us the unique, special town that people want to live in. They come to work here. They put their stakes here and build their futures here in the town.
Excellent. Now, Angie, as an attorney, I'm kind of understand that there's two sides to every coin, especially when it comes to development as an example. But not everybody understands that. And recently I heard you speak on development, and you used the phrase reasonable development. And I thought you articulated it very well. So for our viewers and people who weren't fortunate enough to hear you say that before, what do you mean by reasonable development?
Well, it's very interesting. There was a panel discussion just the other morning about economic development and where we are as a town. And we really are in a very good position. Our, bond rating is the highest a municipality can have, AAA with a stable outlook. And that's something I'm very proud of, working with our town board. When I got to the town 8 years ago, we had a good rating, but not AAA. And so once you get to that point, now the challenge is to keep it that. And we have been reaffirmed by the bond rating agencies 7 times now. So again, I'm very delighted that I'm able to say that. But we look at the town, we look at the fact, and it's not a secret, this is a high-cost area. Everybody agrees that our taxes are high. And everyone likes the services that we provide. They like the fact that we're out there plowing the roads when we're supposed to plow. And we've entered into a very methodical, systematic paving program in the town. We've tripled our paving budget since I've been there. We try to get out there and fix the potholes. We're taking care of our parks. We're taking care of our infrastructure. We've replaced the roof on Town Hall. We've fixed the cupola that was ready to crash and fall off. So when you ask people, can we raise your taxes? No. Do we cut your services? No. So what do? You have to grow your base. And the only way you're going to grow it is by having development. But people moved out here for a certain quality of life, and we cherish it. We do everything we can to protect it. So when I say reasonable development, I mean that we have to have that development in order to sustain us here. But it needs to be reasonable. It needs to be the kind of development that the community can embrace. So when a developer comes in with a project, I am very, very insistent that they meet with the community, that there's buy-in from the community. If a project comes forward and it doesn't meet with that kind of support, and believe me, not everybody is going to embrace every project, but if a developer is ready and willing to sit down with the community and make some reasonable tweaks and get a project to where it's going to be a positive and not negatively impact the quality of life of the residents in that community, then we as a town board will have a comfort level in moving forward in approving something, especially if it's a change of zone.
Now, when we talk about development, again, it is the community, the general knee-jerk reaction tends to be negative. People focus on the negative: traffic, schools, sewers, environmental concerns, what have you. And the positives get lost. As you hit on, increasing the tax base, all right, and taking the burden off of, we're not putting the burden on the residents and putting it onto that development is one. But what are some of the other positive aspects of a development project?
Well, I'll give you an example of a couple, actually, one being in Central Islip. Now, that is a hamlet that has a unique character to it. A lot of positives in Central Islip. There are 2 courthouses. The only federal courthouse on Long Island is in Central Islip. We've got a minor league ballpark. Duck Stadium is there. And that is a major, major success story. We have 2 relatively brand new hotels on Carlton Avenue, a professional private soccer academy. Sousa Academy is right there on Carlton Avenue. So there's a lot of positives and a lot of development has been happening. And one of the things that was there for years was the Central Islip Mental Hospital. That hospital closed many years ago. It was an attraction that brought many, especially many of the Irish coming to Central Islip working in the hospital. But that hospital closed and the property was sold to New York Institute of Technology. Now, that campus existed for a number of years. It was not a very robust campus, and a number of years ago, Tech made the decision to close that campus and ultimately sell the campus. So now we're talking 87 acres. And for so many years, that property was off the tax rolls. Now, you'd have people say, 87 acres, let's, make it a park. Well, if you make it a park, it's still going to be off the tax rolls. So we have an opportunity to put this huge tract of property on the tax rolls, helping to alleviate the burden for the rest of the taxpayers, because now you're growing the base. So a developer came in, bought the 87 acres, and had a proposal for a mixed-use project that was going to have some retail, industrial, et cetera, and they were going to take down all of the buildings. There were 13 buildings on the parcel that were the original hospital buildings built back in the 30s. I think it was a WPA project. And I said to the developer, well, this looks very interesting, but I want you to meet with the community. So they meet with the community. They had a couple of engagement meetings, and they came back with a totally different project. Now, instead of tearing down those 13 buildings, they're reusing every single building. They're building one additional building right now in the first phase that will be like a community center with a pool, et cetera, and all of the amenities. But those 13 buildings that would have been demolished, that would have been carted off to the landfill with all that construction and demolition debris, are being reused. They're being refurbished. And to me, that, first of all, it's an incredible green project when you think about the green technology that's going to be used in the construction or the remediation, and the fact that we're not taking all of that debris to the landfill. And the property is on the tax rolls now.
That's great. Now, when we talk about the negatives that the community brings, and you kind of hit on that a little bit in your last answer, but when they bring up various complaints or concerns, traffic being a major one, school overcrowding, and so forth. What are some of the mechanisms that a municipality has to address those with the developer?
Well, certainly we require traffic studies, and there may be an opportunity for mitigation fees that a developer may have to pay into a fund. But we look at the project in total, and a lot of times the community needs to be educated. And when a developer is coming in with a large project, we at the town now are insisting that they create a website that is specific to that project, that is, maintained in real time, so that if people have questions about a project, they can get them answered, so that there's not hearsay. They're not going on social media and someone says, oh, they're going to be doing this and it's going to mean that, when that's really not true. So that you provide a mechanism for the residents to get their questions answered with factual information and not hearsay.
That's great. So it's no longer relying on just showing up at a hearing for a presentation. Any community member can go right onto that website when it's convenient for them and essentially get the same information that they would as if they went to a hearing.
And if it's a major project, I would encourage the developer to actually almost have a storefront or have an office on the parcel, so that people could walk in any time during the day and see a rendering and have their questions answered. Because again, a lot of times there is misinformation. People get all, wound up about something, and no, I don't want it. It's going to impact the schools. Well, the truth of the matter is that maybe that particular development was age restricted. So there is not going to be, any children per se coming into the development. Or it may be in a hamlet where the school enrollment is down, and they would welcome children coming into the community. Many of our school districts on Long Island now are closing schools. I know the district that I live in, there are probably 3, if not more, fewer schools open than they were when I moved in there 50 years ago. The dynamics have totally changed.
Sure. Now, I just want to go back, because you did mention a phrase, mitigation fees, and I'm not sure that everybody understands what that means. So can you just very quickly define what a mitigation fee is, or a mitigation fund?
And one of the things I have been talking about wanting to do is having a parking mitigation fund, so that if a developer is coming in with a project and they're looking for relief from the number of parking spaces that they're required to have, that they either pay a fee per unit that would go into a parking mitigation fund, so that we could develop more parking in appropriate areas, or a parks mitigation fee. And we will use that to embellish our parks. And that's something that we have been totally committed to, our parks. We have probably close to 100 parks in the town of Islip when you count the neighborhood pocket parks. And we have systematically been going in there, refurbishing them. The playgrounds are not all, but we're working on making sure it's all have that safe structure, that rubberized structure on the base.
You just redid the one in my neighborhood.
Oh, okay. Very cool. And we're trying to get there, but we're also putting turf fields in where we never had them before. And it's an exciting time to be in the parks system in the town of Islip, actually.
And that's interesting. And again, I think that is, and I'm glad we got to speak about it today, because that's one of those things where it's a common complaint of residents. You hear it if you go to a hearing, whether it's the town of Islip, you read it if you see a quote from a resident anywhere on the island that shows up in Newsday. And it's subtle, but people may not realize that some of those concerns are being mitigated through funds that take care of parking, not necessarily right at that location, but maybe within a few blocks of it, or that park that they now says is going to be overused. Well, now it's getting refurbished and through the funds of that development. So that's a great point. I appreciate that.
Also, too, if I can just elaborate on that a little bit, when a project comes before the planning board and they're charged with opining on it, I'm talking about something that may just require a special permit, we can't, or the planning board members can't, just because the neighbors come out and say, oh, we don't want this, there's going to be traffic. And the traffic studies show that it really is not going to have a real detrimental effect or impact on the traffic in a neighborhood. or they just don't want it. They're used to having a vacant lot there that they've been, using themselves and want to keep it quiet. If there really isn't a legitimate reason for denying it, a developer has a recourse. They can go and file an Article 78, and if they can prove that the decision was, not justified, that it was, and I'm not sure what the legal term is. I'm going to say capricious. But
arbitrary, capricious.
Arbitrary, capricious. Okay, you're the attorney. The court will rule in the favor of the developer, and instead of working with the developer and getting concessions and getting a contribution to the parks or, whatever amenities or getting restrictions on the hours that, a restaurant could be open or whatever the thing is, instead of working with the developer and coming up with something that the community feels more comfortable with, they're going to have the court rule, and the guy's going to get what he wanted in the beginning, and the community's going to have to live with it.
Angie, you beat me to it. You jumped into my next line of questioning, and that is, and again, you hit on it. So if I could summarize, residents have this conception that the zoning board, that the municipality, the town, that their elected officials really sit there kind of independent and can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on any project with impunity. Mm-hmm. And that's really not the case. There are federal statutes, state statutes, and case law that control what they can and they can't do. And as you said, if they turn down something without having a legal basis for it, the developer can end up getting what they want anyway. With that dynamic, does it give the town an ability to sometimes shape what the developer does by allowing the developer to not necessarily get everything they want, but at the same point the town gets a smaller development or gets to shape the development project a little more than they would have if they had just said no and let it play out in court?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to try and think of some particular instances, but one was a Walgreens that came before the town board. It was a change of use on Wicks Road, just immediately north of Suffolk Avenue. And adjacent to it, because prior to knowing that we were going to be voting on this application, I drove the area and I wanted to kind of see what was happening. And adjacent or right across the street from where this parcel was, where they wanted to build this Walgreens, was a recharge basin. And there was, rusted fencing around. It's a state recharge basin. Rusted fencing was horrible. So the developer comes and the applicant's there and his attorney is making the presentation and they presented their traffic study, et cetera. And they had lovely elevations and renderings, and they showed what it was going to look like and what the landscaping was going to look like. And of course, we insist that they have an irrigation system, because the last thing you want them to do is to plant, shrubs, and you go by 6 months later and they're brown. So, we can do that. When they're sitting there and they're saying, I want the approval for this change of zone. Well, are you willing to put in an irrigation system? Are you willing to do this, that, or the other? Are you willing to curtail the hours of operation? And I kept thinking about that recharge basin, and I'm looking at these renderings, and he's talking about we're going to have this kind of shrub, and the landscaping is going to be beautiful. And I said, I drove past there, and you're going to have all this beautiful landscaping. How do you feel about that rusty fence right across the street on that recharge basin? Isn't that going to take away from your landscaping? Would you be willing to replace that fencing with a nice black vinyl fencing and maybe put some landscaping in? And of course, they wanted their approval, and they said, oh, of course we will do that. And they did. And if you pass by now, you'll see the black fencing that still looks pristine and far better than it looked before that Walgreens was constructed there.
And that's great. And I think, again, it's not something that's instinctive that most residents would understand, but now that hopefully they do get it, the town or the municipality or the village, whatever it may be, doesn't necessarily have the ability to just give a thumbs up and thumbs down, but they still, because that developer from an economic standpoint wants to develop and do their project as quickly as they can, and they don't want to spend years in litigation, even if they are going to be ultimately successful. So there's a leverage there to negotiate and get concessions that, again, some of the residents may not want the project at all, but if it's inevitable, at least the town or the village or whatever the municipality may be, can exert an influence to shape it as best they can be.
And you're giving the developer the opportunity to come up with a project that the community is going to be supportive of, that the community is going to embrace, so that you don't spend the first 6 months having the neighbors hate you that you built whatever it is. But, it's interesting. There was an assisted living facility, and this project was approved before I got to the town, that was really violently, vehemently opposed by the residents. And I learned after it was all approved and built, and some of those assisted living facilities are absolutely gorgeous. The landscaping is really spectacular. That one of the people who was the most vocal advocate was one of the first people there signing up his mother to go into the assisted living facility. So it's kind of interesting to watch that dynamic play out sometimes.
Now, we did hit on it quickly when we used the example of road congestion and traffic as a potential objection that you get from the community. Other similar ones you hit on with school. Are there any others, or they all pretty much fall about the same in that whether it's sewer districts or sewer issues, other environmental concerns, they're really not black and white. They are kind of have to be reasonable restrictions. Otherwise, we're back to the developer running to court and ultimately getting what they want.
There was an example, again, it's another project that was before the town board for a change of use before I got there. And it was a very heated hearing from what I was told. And it was for a gas station convenience store in a hamlet out east. And it was supposed to be a quick check. And so many people came out and were total opposition to it. And it was denied. And the applicant filed an Article 78. Took a couple of years, but they won their fight in court. And that convenience store, gas station is being built. I believe it's almost complete. But if my information is correct, instead of a quick check, they're getting a 7-Eleven, because in the interim, the developer, the tenant that was supposed to go in there, pulled out. And now they have a different use. So, maybe that isn't what, they may have been happier with a quick check.
And they may have lost out on the opportunity to get some concessions in terms of size, hours of operation, mitigation funds that you discussed as well. Now, when it comes to development, and you hit on this in our conversation so far, you've talked about both taking vacant land as well as repurposing, like New York Tech and so forth. From a tax standpoint, using Islip as an example, is there a preference to developing vacant land into something as opposed to repurposing a existing structure, or is it equal, neutral?
Kind of neutral. I mean, it depends on the project, and certainly if it's property that's off the tax rolls, the way that New York Tech property was across the street from that particular project, it's called the Belmont at Eastview. Across the street is another project that has been approved. Vesta is the name of the developer, and they're proposing some units of housing, but some of it dedicated particularly to veterans and those that are that are developmentally disabled. And there is such a need for that. And they are reusing not all of the buildings, but a lot of the buildings that existed there, because that too was part of New York Tech property. There's another project in downtown Bayshore, really a textbook example of transit-oriented development. It's an apartment complex literally across the street from the train station on Union Boulevard, on the bus route, about a half a block from the downtown area with all the restaurants and shops, about 2 blocks from the ferry, maybe a 10-minute drive from the airport. So, I mean, it doesn't get any more transit-oriented than that particular development does. But that was the Suffolk County Mini Center once upon a time. And
that's where I got my permit to drive.
Okay, yeah.
That's how old I am.
Exactly. I remember it well. There was motor vehicle was there, social services was there, a health center. At one time, the highway patrol was quartered there. There were judges' chambers there. There were all kinds of uses, but the kind of uses that really were not particularly supportive of a downtown. So when the county, was closing that facility and wanted to sell it, I was actually on the legislature at the time. And Touro School of Health Sciences was looking for a place. They had been up in Melville, and they, approached us about citing their health sciences program in that building. So it stayed off the tax rolls, but it certainly was a much better use for the downtown and for potentially developing the downtown, because this was in the mid-90s. When Bayshore was really just starting its renaissance. So it was a great use. You had students coming in and out of there, an apartment complex across the street from there, the Vitagraph building that had a history of its own that was really not in very good shape, got purchased and rehabbed for faculty and students to use. And they were there for quite a number of years until they decided, Touro, to leave there and move their health sciences program to the campus in CI, where the law school is. And so now, again, developer came in, that's 10 acres, and that's TriTech. It's called Shoregate, and they're building away as we speak, and I'm not quite sure when they're opening, but that too is a very exciting project to see happen, and on the tax rolls now.
Excellent. Now, you did mention transit-oriented development, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring the subject up. And that's and I think everybody knows, is that the governor has proposed a state oversight committee that if development didn't occur basically within a certain distance of railroads, train and transit-oriented centers, all through Long Island and as well into upstate, that if the local municipality doesn't approve multi-family zoning, all right, in that area, then the developers would now have a state commission that can override local control. Pretty much, it seems to be bipartisan everywhere on the island. Everybody is against it in terms of, the municipalities, the villages, and the towns. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you would like to comment on that.
Well, I will tell you that when we heard about it, I was watching the governor's state of the state address. And when she said that, when she talked about affordable housing and wanting to build all of these units of housing, and that she was very disappointed, I forget what the word she used, about the town's onerous decisions when it came to planning decisions about affordable housing, onerous decisions. And I'm listening and I'm like, wait a minute, we don't make onerous decisions, And the next day there was a scheduled Zoom call with the governor's housing team, her commissioner of housing, and a number of others, and it was scheduled for the town supervisors and village mayors who could log on. So I went on the call and listened to them trying to sell the governor's proposal, and they're talking about 800,000 units across the state. They're talking about rezoning the property around train stations to allow for 50 units per acre, okay? An acre is not that big, so we're talking, mini skyscraper kind of buildings to accommodate 50 units per acre. And depending on how close to the city you were, it was less units. The whole thing didn't make sense at all. And then I thought, well, we're already doing that. We're addressing housing. We've built 2,000 units of housing in the last 10 years in the town of Islip. Doesn't that count for something? 35 years ago, the town of Islip built the first totally affordable housing project in, it's called College Woods, but it was Carlton Park at the time.
Sure.
It was an area of the town that even the police didn't want to go to. God's honest truth, they would not go in without an escort. And so the place was raised. These homes, townhouses were built. Utilities were put in underground. It is still a lovely, pristine community. 35
I've had many
years
clients
later.
buy in there. It is a gorgeous community right up by Goldhaven Golf Course.
Exactly. So, we've been doing it. And fast forward, I guess it was about a month ago, the governor was down here trying to sell this proposal about the housing. And after the press conference, a meeting was arranged for the supervisors in Suffolk County. We have an association. Rich Schaefer is the head of this association. I'm the vice chair of it. And we were able to get the governor to sit down with us for like 20 minutes and listen to what we had to say. and her housing person was with her. And when I said, you need the infrastructure, we can't put all of these units in if you don't have sewers. Oh, well, if you don't have sewers, it doesn't count. Well, you didn't say that. And my point to the governor, and I was pretty strong about it, communicate with us. We want to provide housing, for the next generation, for empty nesters. We want to do that. We are doing it, but you got to communicate. And to create this tribunal that's going to override town decisions, there already is a mechanism. It's the Article 78, as we both spoke about. So why create another level of bureaucracy at the state level? I think there's enough.
So, Angie, again, I want to thank you so much. Before I start wrapping it up, though, I would like to add two things. If there's a developer who's happened to watch this and wants to do business with or do business in the town and develop a project, is there a contact at the town that they should speak to?
Call Town of Islip, our general number, and you'll be routed to the appropriate person, and it's 631-224-5000. Or you can call my number direct, 224-5506, and we'll be happy to talk to you. And generally what I like to do when someone has an idea for a project is to set up a meeting with our planning department ahead of time. Don't run out and get architectural renderings done and pay thousands and thousands of dollars, and then you come in and they look at it and they go, oh, no, that's never going to work. If you have an idea, come in and get it vetted first. And our staff is incredible. They love working with people. They want to make things happen, but in a right and appropriate way.
Excellent. Now, for residents of the town of Islip, is there a way or a mechanism for them to stay in the loop to know when development is being proposed in their area so that they can...
Absolutely. I mean, we are required by law, and we're really very good about it. I mean, we're dedicated to being transparent. Our website is there. Planning board meetings are held on Wednesdays every couple of weeks. The agendas are posted ahead of time. Town board meetings, the agendas are posted ahead of time. Zoning Board of Appeals, change of zone, all of those agendas and meeting notices are posted on our website. And you can sign up for e-alerts, because if there's something really critical happening, you'll get an e-alert. So I just urge everyone to go to the website, islipny.gov, and just click on e-alerts, and you'll be notified.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. Angie, again, I want to thank you so much for being here today, for shedding some light on on reasonable development and how development, plays out and how it's viewed and where the municipality sits in that mix. As we said going in, development is happening everywhere on Long Island and always has been and will continue. If you're a resident on Long Island, this is going to affect you, and you need to know how to interact with your municipality, what to expect reasonably of the municipality and the developer, so that you can have your concerns expressed in a way that they're going to be addressed as best they can be. We used Islip Town graciously with Angie Carpenter's help, but this pretty much is everywhere, whether you're in a small village, whether you're in Nassau County, Suffolk County, wherever you are. This will be hopefully is instrumental for helping you understand how your municipality works when it comes to development, so that you can interact with your individual municipality in a better, more productive way. Again, my name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney on Long Island. My contact information will be at the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, not putting aside me flubbing my words recently, please hit the like button so that Google understands that this is worthwhile to watch. Thank you, and as always, if you have any questions or concerns about this or any other video or anything related to real estate, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.